nothing connects you to aviation's history, and American aviation history in particular, more than flying warbirds. It really gives you a sense for the skills that the greatest generation pilots developed, and how they were able to go from flying Stearmans and T6s onto jet supersonic fighters and transports and all the things that generation accomplished in flying. And so when you are around warbirds, and if you're lucky enough to get to fly them, you really feel those. You really feel that presence. It's almost like the ghosts are in the cockpit with you as you really touch and feel and smell. And it's a sensory experience to fly those airplanes, and you feel a connection to that portion of aviation history that is irreplaceable to me.
Yeah, and then if you're fortunate enough to actually meet one of them and talk to them and hear their experiences too, like I have been able to for the B25, and then to get to go and fly in that, it really did bring home a connection, and but it was such an honor actually to be able to go up in one. And
you mentioned the experience of being in the airplane flying, and that's something that lots of us have got to experience through the rides program that the Commemorative Air Force and EAA and the Cullings Foundation have offered, and that's just to me it's such a valuable and irreplaceable experience, because we pilots will be focused on the flying part, but the experience of what it must have been like to work on these airplanes and to build them, and to have them flying overhead by the thousands, that's something that you've really got to sort of touch and feel to get an appreciation for.
Yes, and then just to imagine, like you said, with thousands of them flying overhead, or if you're the one flying it in a combat situation, and when you think of how young a lot of these pilots were, and it really does put you in their shoes.
Yeah, that's so true, because they were those airplanes that were built sort of by 18-year-olds for 18-year-olds. I mean, they were, and Rosie the Riveter was a real thing, and I remember the plane that I flew the most was a Dauntless, a Douglas Dauntless, the dive bomber from Midway. And, I'll never forget the first time you get in the cockpit, and the main feature of the cockpit is this sliding navigational tray. It's this big, giant E6B sort of whiz wheel. And it really brings home the fact that the people who were flying this in combat were doing it, out over the ocean, navigating this single engine airplane. They're flying to and from a ship. The ship's moving, the wind's moving. It's a complex navigational problem. Forget the combat part. Just the navigating to and from the target was it's to me, in this age of GPS, it's almost incomprehensible.
Yeah, and the B-25, I didn't actually get to fly that one, but I was in a crew seat for a flight in one after talking to some of the Doolittle Raiders a few years ago, when about a handful of them were still living. And I'd heard their stories, and they had to learn how to land and take off from an aircraft carrier, and then to hear how they launched on the Doolittle Tokyo raid in those B-25s, and how they were navigating, and the weather, and I was just sitting there listening to these stories, and I thought, man, for me it'd be a miracle if I just made it there. But so many of them, they did make it, achieve their mission, and then survived beyond that, and it's just nothing short of remarkable in those planes, that they're not easy. Some of them, when they crashed afterwards, it's how they got out of the planes, I don't know. They're incredibly hard for a fit person to be able to get in and out of, let alone after they've gone down and possibly been injured.
Right, and you know, the humility of the people that, like the two little writers that you mentioned, it's,
Yeah.
you know, they seem almost superhuman when you read about them, but then when you meet them in person, and no, too bad, you know, they're gone now, but when, you know, when when you met them in person, or you met any of the the flyers from that generation, they didn't regard themselves as anything special. You know, they were called upon to do a difficult, dangerous job, and they did it to the best of their abilities. And they did it in these airplanes. You know, most of them, you know, these, I just keep coming back to the Dauntless or the T6 or the Stearmans that I had most of my experience in. And, you know, they just seem so flimsy. You know, they seem so inadequate for the task, and you know, but they thought nothing of you know, going to war in the planes that they were assigned.
Mm-hmm. The B24 was another that I've gotten to be in, and actually flew it. And it felt a bit like a whale maneuvering around in the air. But then when the pilot, I was actually with the Collings Foundation, which is grounded for passenger flights right now, but the pilot just was remarkable what he was doing to land the airplane. You know, they weren't built like, you know, our 172 Skycatcher Lando-Matics are today.
That's so true, because you get an appreciation of the skill that it required. And you know, when I was flying the Dauntless, it was yeah, I mean, it's like I've got a GPS on board. I am flying. No one is shooting at me. You know, I am flying off a big paved runway most of the time. And but it really, you get this appreciation for you know, just the courage and the skill that it must have taken, you know, for these, you know, incredibly young and frankly some pretty inexperienced pilots from a flying standpoint. You know, they would finish, you know, their flight training with a few hundred hours, and then they're going to go, you know, they're going to go to war in these airplanes, and it's like the skill that it must have taken, and the courage that it must have taken to do those things. You know, we just get a hint at, because, you know, we can sort of touch the objects, but you know, the experience of flying them when the world depends on you doing it successfully is something that unfathomable to me.
Yeah. And then when you consider some of the WASPs, and they were moving planes back and forth here in the US, and they would be flying all of these warbirds, you know, not just one of them, and they didn't just train to learn one specific airplane, but they had to be versatile enough to fly all of these.
And, you know, you know, they were producing them so fast that they were, you know, relatively untested. And, you know, the reliability of these airplanes fresh out of the factory was nothing to write home about. I mean, it's you know, I'm sure that they had mechanical failures, and even when things were working, you know, they didn't have anything like the weather reporting that we have, or the ATC and radar coverage. You know, it was just such a different world, and these airplanes are so wonderful to me because they hint at all that stuff, and you know, the more you're around them, the more you gain an appreciation for the accomplishments of the aviators that came before us. You know, the T6 was you know, a real it was used by the Navy and the Army Air Corps, and, you know, a huge number of anybody who flew fighters in World War II would have had the T6 as a touchstone. And there's an old joke about once you've flown the P-51 and the P-47, then you're ready to land the T6, because they have a well-earned reputation for being difficult on the ground. And so, you know, the ground handling, the taking off and the landing, bounce landings. The T6 can be a real handful. And, it's got a big engine. It's a 600 horsepower engine, but it feels pretty underpowered because it's a pretty heavy airplane. It's got a swept leading edges of the wings, and that when you stall or depart controlled flight, it's got some pretty wild departure characteristics, because one wing is going to be typically making more lift than the other. And so, it was an advanced trainer in World War II. Later in the 50s and 60s, they used them as primary trainers. And it's just inconceivable to me that a person goes from no flight experience at all to the front seat of a T6 and, within 15 hours is going to solo and then be doing, cross country and formation flying. The learning curve must have been incredibly steep.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, one of a jet warbird that I've flown that's newer than that, but the L-39 Albatross. I got to take a lesson in one of those out in Santa Fe with Jet Warbird Training Center, and that's actually the first time I had flown a jet, period. But to be able to get in it, taxi it, actually take off and fly it, and then do touch and goes, for me was amazing. I was treating it a bit like a 172. That's what I had most of my hours in at the time, and it's so responsive to fly that airplane that I was over controlling like crazy. But after relaxing a bit and getting the feel for it, and flying with just 2 fingers and a thumb, and then doing loops and rolls and everything in the jet, it made me feel like I would imagine a Top Gun flying.
Yeah, that gives you a look into what the Eastern Bloc pilots were flying in the L-39.
Mm-hmm.
The Stearman is an interesting airplane to me because as difficult as the T6 can be to land, the Stearman in a lot of ways is harder. It's very lightly wing loaded, has a high center of gravity and a very narrow wheelbase, and so and that too is a very underpowered airplane, and to me they learning to fly in a Stearman is just quite an accomplishment, and tens of thousands of pilots did it at the time. And they didn't think much about it because everybody else was doing it. But when you look at the syllabus for the maneuvers that they would fly and the aerobatics that they would fly in this underpowered Stearman with no inverted systems at all, I remember just feeling a lot of disbelief because they would learn inverted spins in the Stearman, and naturally doing an inverted spin in an airplane with no inverted fuel or oil system means that the engine quits when you get negative G's. And all it said about the engine quitting was, reduce the throttle setting when the engine restarts so as not to exceed the RPM limits. And they just did all this stuff without thinking much about it. When, to me, it just seems extraordinary.
I think that would make my heart stop momentarily.
Yeah, and just negative G's in an open cockpit airplane is pretty startling in and of itself. And the idea of learning inverted spins, and that was just a normal part of the curriculum. It boggles the mind.
Yeah. Wow. Well, the MiG-15 is another warbird, jet warbird that I had the opportunity to fly, and comparing it with the L-39 was very sensitive in pitch, but the MiG-15 was sensitive in the roll. And Dave, you've been talking about underpowered airplanes. This plane definitely has the power, and it was a blast just to go super fast. Now, we were a lot more careful what we did in that aircraft than in the L-39, because when the MiG-15 gets really slow, it does not behave well, and that's especially typical when you get down on downwind in the pattern and start coming in to land. But when you're several thousand feet up and doing rolls and things like that, and just doing a steep dive to build up speed and get close to Mach, then it is absolutely amazing. It's a little intimidating strapping down in the canopy of it, though. I don't know Dave, how was your F-16 flight? That you would have been going faster than the MiG-15.
Well, that was just an extraordinarily good deal that, you know, every taxpayer should get to go fly in one of those airplanes sometimes, because it was it's an extraordinary experience. It almost didn't seem real. It's more video game than reality. But you know, Richard McSpadden, our ASI director, is a former Thunderbird. You know, somehow he pulled some strings that allowed that to happen. I'll never forget it. It's I'll appreciate the pilot that I flew with. He was kind of easy on me. I was egging him on a little bit because I knew this was the only time I'd ever be in an F-16, and so I wanted to see everything. I just wanted to see maximum performance. And I'm sure that, you know, he could have held 9 Gs and blacked me out, and I wouldn't have remembered a thing. But fortunately, he was pretty gentle on me. You know, we did 9 Gs, but it was only momentary. But it gave me a real appreciation for you know, just what an incredible airplane that is, and how much the state of the art has developed. You know, because you think about it, and it's you know, from the 1930s and 40s to these, when the Stearman and the T6 were being built, to the I guess it was really just the late 70s when the F-16 came around. You see this just unimaginable leap in technology. It's the F-16. It's just it's kind of a miraculous airplane in a lot of ways, because you'll be going, say, name a speed. You'll be going 500 knots, and you'll load it up to, you know, 6 or 7 Gs, and you'll do this sustained turn where you would think that it would be bleeding off energy and bleeding off speed. But, you know, that airframe is so efficient and that engine is so powerful that it doesn't decelerate at all. You know, in the general aviation planes that I'm accustomed to flying, you know, if you're going steeply up, you're probably slowing down, and if you're going straight down, you're probably speeding up. But it's you know, in that brief time in the F-16 just kind of brought home the point that in a plane like that, it really doesn't matter. You could be going up and accelerating, and you can be going straight down and slowing down. You know, it's you know, the attitude of the airplane is almost irrelevant.
Yeah. You know, sort of similarly, when you mentioned the attitude of the airplane, it doesn't matter. I remember the first time when it really hit home for me that it doesn't matter, you know, what pitch angle you're at to stall an airplane, you know, and it was for me in the L-39 coming down the backside of a loop, you know, and I'm coming around and I'm seeing the ground rushing up at me, you know, at L-39 speeds, and so I'm pulling back, and you start to feel the airplane vibrate slightly, and my instructor says, okay, that's, you know, a warning for a stall, just release a little bit of pressure. And that hit home that, you know, you can stall at any angle, and for me that was, you know, pitch straight down full speed ahead toward the ground.
Right. Yeah. Once that critical angle of attack is reached, it's going to stall, and the wing doesn't know which way the airplane's pointed. That's for sure. Yeah. True. Yeah. And that just sort of hints at the skills pilots develop to fly these things, and it's it clearly, I would, like I was saying, I just flew them from one place to the other to put them on display at air shows, and to really operate them the way they were as a tool of war, where it's you need totally maximum performance out of them. That's orders of magnitude more difficult.
Yeah, and for the pilots and instructors who are flying the aircraft today and making them available, for people like us to go up in them for stories and articles, or for people to go up in them at air shows, it's amazing the skill that they have and confidence they have to be able to help keep that alive for the rest of us. Because even though, my experiences have been through assignments, but they're all accessible to the general public. Anyone, they can go take lessons at the Warbird Training Center or go up on some of these other tours. But, the pilots who have the confidence and skill and knowledge to let you actually be a part of that, I'm quite thankful for all those folks. Well, Dave, what other warbirds have you flown?
Not a huge number. I guess I've started with the Stearman and the T6, the SBD Dauntless are the main ones. And Alyssa, tell me, you've got to fly a B24 Liberator. What was that like?
I did just last year. That was a lot of fun. Getting to be part of a crew and help do the call outs and operating all four engines. Took both of my hands for the throttles to help, and maneuvering those, and actually being a full-fledged part for the takeoff, and then flying the airplane once we were in the air. One of the call outs on the checklist was, checking each engine, and part of that was my engine's not on fire. And I kind of looked over the pilot, was not expecting that. And I said, mine aren't on fire either, thank goodness. But, for some people in the back who are walking around, to be able to feel the change in the center of gravity and the pitch, the impact that it had on that, and then bringing it in to the airport, and the pilot actually did the landing. And I mean, he was going full scale deflection, forward and back on the pitch, which, you think about doing that in a typical GA airplane, you're like, oh, gonna, porpoise. But the pitch didn't change at all, and he's really just pumping the control stick. So it speaks to, the skill that they had to have landing that airplane. But for the 10 minutes or so in the air, it was just a dream come true getting to be part of that.
And one thing that I didn't realize is that here in the 21st century is that these opportunities are available for civilian pilots. I thought that you had to be have a military flying background to fly these airplanes, or a gigantic checkbook. But I just remember going out to the Commemorative Air Force chapter in Atlanta when I used to live there, and I'd ask, so what does a person have to do to get involved with this organization and to fly this airplane? And it really it was some tailwheel skills, some tailwheel experience was sort of the key that unlocked the door to those sorts of airplanes. And if you've got an A&P certificate or a CFI or some tailwheel experience and multi-engine experience, organizations like that need you. They're volunteer run, and they very much depend on the skills and the volunteer time and effort that civilian pilots can bring.
Well, if that isn't ever motivation to build up your tail wheel and flight instructing hours, that'll do it.
Yeah, it's true. And you know, it used to be that all military pilots just about had T6 time or SNJ time, and you know those days are long gone. But if you've got tail wheel experience, and especially sort of heavier airplane tail wheel experience, they need you. And if you can teach in those airplanes, if you can make the transition to teach in a Stearman or teach in a T6, you know, you can be a really valuable person to those organizations, and you can have some just incredible aviation experiences and meet some really neat people along the way.